Foreign ministers from the G7 nations have reaffirmed their support for Ukraine and its territorial integrity. The group of 7 ministers met in Canada and negotiated late into the night, releasing a joint statement. This supports the U.S. ceasefire proposal and urges Russia to come to the table or face further sanctions. Speaking after the summit, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed the Kremlin's comments, saying he was cautiously optimistic about a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. DW's Janelle Dumalaon has been following the meeting for us. Janelle, tell us more about the outcome.
Yeah, Nicole, so this G7 foreign ministers meeting is wrapping up here in Charlevoix, Quebec. And as you said, that customary joint statement is now out. That customary list of common G7 positions on a host of issues around the world, from Ukraine to the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific. A lot of it expected, all of it in carefully vetted language. It was, for example, quite expected that the G7 foreign ministers would lend their backing to that U.S.-led effort to secure a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. But there were parts of the statement that were a bit more surprising. You mentioned it already, that part about how the G7 was prepared to defend the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine. Now, we say that's surprising because it's coming after weeks of having heard from various corners of the U.S. government how they believe that Ukraine should be prepared to make territorial concessions in order to secure peace. Now, the fact that this language has made its way in the statement perhaps signals to us how much the Europeans pushed to have it in there. Now, conversely, what was missing from that statement that was present in previous G7 statements was this language describing Russia's attack on Ukraine as an illegal act of aggression. Now, we don't know why this wasn't present this time around in the statement. We can only ask ourselves, perhaps the U.S. had some hand in that, but we don't know exactly. Overall, however, it was a very interesting dynamic here. This was an occasion where you had one country that was in a trade war with the other members of the G7, a trade war against the EU, a trade war against Canada. You had the U.S. threatening the sovereignty of the host country, Canada. But in the end, they got together. There was a joint statement in the end. And I think the thing that we have to look out for next is how much this statement will apply in Trump's Washington.
You mentioned the tensions between the U.S. and Canada there. You did speak to people in Canada. Let's take a look at how they see the situation as the country just swore in its new prime minister.
Along the stretch of Old Quebec on the St. Lawrence River, all is peaceful. But Donald Trump's posture towards Canada has people here feeling embattled.
It's totally crazy. He's a crazy man. That's honestly, that's all we have to say.
If I would describe it in one word, I would say in French, égoïste, which is selfish. Yeah.
I don't hate the Americans, but Trump is not my guy.
Once the closest of allies, the relationship between the U.S. and Canada has deteriorated amid a trade war that saw Washington impose tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, hitting its neighbor, a major exporter of both. Canada chose to respond with $20 billion of its own retaliatory tariffs. And Trump's repeated threats to annex Canada have also weighed on the two countries' relations. According to a recent survey, around 38% of Canadians believe that Canada should view the U.S. as a threat to Canadian interests. Now, around the time of the U.S. presidential election last year in November, that number was just at 13%. And now, the number of those who would go so far as to say that Canada should treat the U.S. as an enemy is up to 13%, up from 3% in November. Some fear even worse to come.
If he doesn't stop being the way he is, I mean, we're going to unite with other countries and we're going to maybe go at war if it comes to it. And that would be really horrible. So hopefully it doesn't come to that.
As ties with the U.S. rise to the top of Canadians' concerns, all eyes are on Prime Minister Mark Carney, a political novice, but considered an experienced crisis manager from his time as a central bank governor. His challenge will be to repair Canada's bond with the U.S. while refusing to be bullied.
Janelle, just really quickly, what can we expect from Canada's new prime minister in dealing with the U.S.?
Well, he's expected to be a technocrat with a strong grasp of the fundamentals, someone who could be trusted in the face of an economic war with the U.S., someone who is going to be able to manage the relationship with Trump, if not outright outsmart him. But of course, there are still several uncertainties. We don't know if he's going to win the next election. When he calls it, he might still lose to his conservative rival, Pierre Poilievre. But for now, he is the man in the job, the man expected to stand up to Trump and to deliver for Canada.
DW's Janelle Dumalaon reporting from Charleroi in Canada. Thanks so much for all of that, Janelle.